My name is Marty Bacher. It's my privilege to welcome you here today to Unity of Charlotte. It's an honor to be of service. We're grateful that you can be here. Unity offers us a practical and progressive approach to Christianity based on the teachings of Jesus and the power of prayer. We teach the effective daily application of these principles that were taught and exemplified through Jesus Christ. And we promote a way of life that leads to health, prosperity, happiness, and peace of mind. We're here personally to nurture a deep and abiding sense of the divine through these practices. And so we're just grateful you're here. We believe that spiritual community enhances our experience. It allows us to go deeper. It allows us to grow and evolve. And so we're just grateful that you can be here today as part of our experience. We hope that if you're new to the community, you received a welcome packet. If not, we'll make sure you get one. We'd like to invite you to join our mail list and to like us on Facebook and all the other fun ways so we can stay in contact. Beautiful. Thank you, Miss Susan Caney. Our wonderful choir. How you doing today? Good. You want to hear the truth today, or you just want me to make some stuff up? It's all made up, really, right? What we like to call truth is sometimes just stuff we made up. We hold it as true. But today I wanted to speak to you about that famous saying that says, the ignorance of the law is no excuse. Anyone ever heard it? Yeah. Sometimes in not pleasant circumstances, right? When your ignorance came full bore and you're paying the consequence for having not known, and yet the violation was the violation, was it not? So often in metaphysics, we speak to this idea of spiritual laws, that there are fundamental spiritual laws at work in our universe, and that as we begin to understand those and we begin to apply them, we are at choice as what our experience of life looks like. So for me, coming out of kind of a traditional background where I had a concept of God, of the divine, as a guy, because, I grew up in this era, as a guy who lived in a cloud, who watched and judged me. You'd think he'd be busy, but apparently he was not too busy to watch me and was keeping an eye out, making sure, things were right? I grew up with the concept of a God that we prayed to, the God that played favorites, a God that took sides, that rewarded some and punished others. And I remember even as a child thinking, well, somehow this is not computing for me. It's not computing that a loving God would be less than loving to any of his children. So I began asking questions that were apparently not very welcome in my vacation Bible school and really never got satisfactory answers for me. Grateful for the experience, grateful for my upbringing, grateful for all of it, but there was a quest for me, as long as I can remember, to understand the nature of the divine and to understand my place in the universe. Why are we here, right? We all have that question. Why are we here? It's certainly more than just to get a job and make a living and have babies and do all that stuff, although all those things are wonderful, grateful for that. But is there something more? And so I remember when I began studying, I found a church not dissimilar to this one, where I began to learn the principles. And they began to speak about the divine, about God in a different context. They began to explain how this universe in which we live is based on law and order. That it is based on universal spiritual principles, and that one way of understanding that is all of the great masters, all of the teachers throughout time have tried to help us in their own way understand these principles and how to use them. Now, this is my bias, but I think that's what all the teachers have tried to do. Now, what we tend to do as human beings is we have a master who teaches us spiritual insight, about wisdom, about these principles, about how to use them, and then we build religions around that person, right? Whereas, again, my bias, whereas when we get to the heart of all religions, we find some universal truths. So for me, it was more interesting to find what are those universal truths than to fully understand who's right and who's wrong and why Judaism and not Christianity or by, any of that kind of stuff. Because I believe that when you look at the heart, at the inner being of all religious tradition, that teaches this idea of fundamental love, to love one another. And it teaches that there are universal spiritual principles at work. So I began to realize that so much of my efforts of trying to get God to be different, in other words, if I were to be honest with you, and why not? We're all here, we're all friends, right? If I were to be honest with you, I would suggest that many of my efforts in prayer as a young person were to trying to get God to change his mind about my situation. So my prayers looked like begging, beseeching, occasionally a little bargaining, I'm willing to do this if you're willing to do that, right? And so when I began to understand these principles, it opened up a new aspect that all of the truths that I had understood as a child became more true. I was able to, if you will, separate wheat from chaff. And I began to see how the teachings that I had grown up with were still relevant, but applied in a new way. And so when I look at the life of Jesus, who I find as a master teacher for all of us, I find him teaching us these principles. And that if we learn these principles, then, as he said, greater works than these you shall also do. Right? I mean, I heard that, but I didn't hear it. Now, I'm still working on the whole walking on water piece, but, I'm getting there, right? Story for another time. But this idea that each one of us has that power. So when I began to make this shift, I had to change my own way of thinking. Because I realized that it's not now about me getting God to change his or her mind, but rather for me to change my mind about the nature of life itself. You see, this teaching will mess with you, as you will well know if you've been in it for a while, right? You're like, oh, this is all great. I'm so happy I get to control my life by controlling my thinking. Yes, in theory, but right? It's like, that's exciting. But then you realize if the universe is not playing favorites, then what's happening in my life is not about being rewarded or being punished, but about my own interaction with the universal intelligence and the universal laws that are at work. And that if I would change anything in my life, it would have to start with me. I often use the analogy that if I go to the mirror in the morning and my hair is doing one of those creative expressions it likes to do in the morning, I don't try and fix the mirror. Right? Oh, what's wrong with the mirror today? Because this is wild. This is crazy. Right? I look in the mirror and I go, my hair's a mess. Maybe I should straighten out my mirror. Likewise, if I look at my life and things aren't flowing, if things aren't joyous, if things aren't whatever, it's not life reflecting back to me something different than anything that's the outer expression of my inner being. And so time and time again, it comes back to, who am I? In this teaching, we teach about how there's three aspects of the divine. That there's the Spirit, and then there's what we would call the law or the creative medium, and then there's the outpicturing of that. We're given a great example right up front. If you ever read the Bible, you only have to get through the first page, and you get some really good teachings. Because it talks about the creative process. And we know in reading that it says in the beginning there was this chaos, this whatever, muckiness. And God said, who knows this? Quick, pop quiz. Vacation Bible School, pop quiz, you get a free affirmation or something if you know this. What happened? What's the first words?
Let there be light.
And what happened?
There was light.
Oh my goodness. So you got to imagine, if you're a God, you're like, whew, that was cool. I wonder what else. And so it starts speaking the word and letting it be so. And therein is the creative process. And so this was not an event that happened some time ago. This is the ongoingness of Spirit. Lucky for us, we can realize that we are co-creative beings with this divine intelligence, and that in some way or another, we're always in a process of saying, let there be. Now, perhaps if we had the discipline to say those words first before anything else came out of our mouth, we might be a little more conscious about what we're saying. Let there be brokenness in my life today. Let there be no money in my account. Let all of my relationships fall apart, and let me be right about whatever. We'd be like, well, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Why would I say such a thing? But some people we know, nobody in the room, obviously, but people we know will let words slip from their mouth about what they don't want to experience, and then they experience and they're angry. They're angry, they're upset. How could God let this happen to me? Well, the image comes to mind of like, hey, I think I'll go ride a roller coaster. You get on the roller coaster, and you're halfway through, and you're scared, and you're like, I can't believe that just happened. That just scared me. Then don't buy the ticket. Or buy the ticket and don't get on. But if you buy the ticket and you get on, get ready for the ride. Right? So, likewise, this teaching is so simple in some ways. Just so simple. And in other ways, which is not to mean it's easy, because it takes discipline, it takes practice, it takes learning how to think differently, how to learn to manage our thought, to realize that we're at choice about the thoughts that we have, about the beliefs that we hold, about the words that we speak, about the actions that we take. Some of them have become so subconscious for us that we never think about it. How many of you put your left shoe on first every day? How many of you put your right shoe on every day first? And how many of you have no clue? Right. Check, though. My guess is it's the same foot every single day, right? Which is the great, wonderful gift of subconscious is we don't have to think through everything we need to do every day. Subconscious takes it, says, I got this. You learn to ride a bike. Now you can ride a bike and think about other things. But the first time you're learning to ride a bike, there's a whole skill set that takes some conscious thought and activity, right? First time you learn to drive, there's some thought. Those of us that learned how to drive with sticks, there's a lot that goes on there. You got both feet working, both arms working. You're supposed to, there's a whole lot going on. Now, we drive, we text, we call, we do our hair, fix our makeup, just all of it while in the process. No, we don't. Don't. Right? We don't have to think about the action of driving because we know how to drive. It's in our subconscious. It's a beautiful gift the universe has given us, this subconscious mind. What we don't often realize that so too in our subconscious holds the beliefs that we have formed over our lifetime. And so when we've been exposed to other people's beliefs, we at some moment may choose them as our own, accept them as our own. So sometimes our parents said things about money and how money works and how work works and about struggle and about all these wonderful things. And we accepted those as true and began to live as if they were true, when in reality they're simply beliefs that we have formed and keep playing out. Right? Isn't that exciting? Because what it says to us is if my belief has formed this, a new belief can transform this. And therein lies the work. What am I choosing today? How am I choosing to perceive reality? How am I choosing to speak? How am I choosing to view myself? Do I see myself as a sacred, once-in-a-lifetime experience of the divine? Or do I see myself as too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too old, too young? Or whatever, fill in the blanks, right? But to really see ourselves as the emanation of the living Spirit is not an egotistical thing to do, because it's true for all. But to learn to love ourselves, to learn to respect ourselves, to learn to cherish ourselves is a starting point to truly love and cherish others as well. It's a fundamental truth, but when we're not right with our own relationship with self, we tend to play that out with others. Have you ever noticed that? You ever noticed how some people are really arrogant or really judgmental or really this or really that? And then we go look in the mirror at the person that just made those judgments out of their arrogance, and you're like, it's me, right? But it's so much easier sometimes to see what we don't want to see in ourselves in others. We project that on other people. So my work is always to be able to look at what I'm perceiving in the world and seeing how am I seeing that. Now, this is to say that I get to be a choice as to how I want to be. And so when I find myself less than loving, obviously the thing I do is judge myself harshly, because that brings more love to the world. Or option B would be to forgive myself and to make a new choice. Really, all forgiveness is making a new choice. It is a return to love, as Marianne Williamson said so eloquently in the Course in Miracles before her. That it is a choice to love ourselves, to forgive ourselves, to keep deepening in our spiritual growth until we reach that level of that the masters have, where they see beyond the appearance of things. You see, the spiritual work, this is what allows healing to occur. When we talk about physical healing of the body, it is a recognition that there is a divine prototype. There's a spiritual essence. And so our work, and I believe the work that Jesus did and his disciples did and those who have studied this are doing, is they're not seeing the condition, but seeing beyond the condition to the spiritual prototype. It's not to deny the condition per se. You see, I come back to this over and over and over. When we start to look at this teaching and we begin to see that there's a spiritual realm, there's an invisible law that works upon this creative intelligence, spirit, love, life, God. And then there's the manifestation of the form. Sometimes people call that cause and effect. That's another term for it. That there's a cause, there's a spiritual cause for every effect. Likewise, some people call it karma. What goes around comes around. Isn't that amazing? Right? There's a lot of different names for it. I always like to remind myself when I'm looking at this that there's a spiritual dimension to who we are that is whole, perfect, complete, abundant, joyful, all of it. And then there's our daily life that has this body. And to me, it's the ability to look at the form as the fact. These are facts, right? It's not to say it doesn't exist. It is to say these are the facts. I'm having this experience. But the truth of who I am is always wholeness, is always love, is always joy, is always peace, is always connected with the divine. And so we don't have to say, you see, one of the mistakes I think sometimes metaphysicians make is they don't want to say anything negative, right? Don't say that. Don't affirm that. But if you realize that this law of mind works upon our consciousness, which is at a subconscious level, not having said it doesn't change it. The law is still working upon the unexpressed self. And in fact, sometimes the non-expression creates the block to our greater good. You see? So sometimes it's better to say, I feel angry. Is that too much? Should we not start there? Should we work our way up to that one? Let's just do an experiment. Say with me, I feel angry.
I feel angry.
Now, you don't have to feel angry or not, right? If you weren't feeling angry before, you're not going to start feeling angry because I just made you say it, right? It's just an acknowledgement of something that's going on. And by expressing what's going on, we can then make a choice. But I choose to feel love. You see, they're not exclusive. Sometimes I can be angry and be in a state of love. In fact, anger can be a great motivator. Anger can get some stuff done. You ever notice that? I never clean my house as good as when I'm not happy about something, right? Right? It's just a feeling. It's not who we are. That's the essence of what we have to keep remembering, what we have to keep returning to, is that who we are is spiritual being, spiritual essence, spiritually connected with the divine. And the wholeness of the divine is our wholeness. And we have thoughts, and we have feelings, and we have emotions, and we make actions, and we do all of this stuff. But the essence of who we are remains the same. And that's why when we talk about spiritual practice, about returning to source, returning to that ground of being where we remember the truth. Now, here's a little thought for you. If I am not my actions, if I am not my mistakes, maybe that's true for others as well. Am I going too fast? Do we want a second on that one? Right? I remember a friend saying to me one time, we were talking about how sometimes when we go home to visit, Thanksgiving or whatever, old stuff gets triggered, right? Isn't it amazing how you can become 12? Just, put down the mashed potatoes and there you are, 12 years old. You got more than I did, or whatever, right? And we just move into that state. My friend said to me, I had this thought that if I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago, maybe they aren't either. What would happen if I showed up and experienced them for who they are now? Right? So what I love about the teaching is it empowers us. You see, I'm no longer waiting for God to grant me a favor, because that's all God does. That is the grace of God, the self-givingness of Spirit pouring itself into existence. And all that the universe is really doing ultimately is delighting in its self-expression, letting itself be through its creation. And so when we move into the alignment, into the state of let it be so in my life, guess what happens? It begins to be so. different experiences begin to happen for us. You see, there is this law of attraction that we've heard so much about. And the law of attraction is simply that resonance of that we are attracting to ourselves the level of vibration that we're currently experiencing. And so we broadcast that out into the world, and then that which is attracted to that vibration is attracted to us. And that which is not goes away. Sometimes there's a little resistance before it goes away. But that's ultimately what happens. So what I realize is that sometimes we're working in this level of law of attraction, and then sometimes we're working with the law of distraction. Right? And the law of distraction is really the same as the law of attraction. It's just where do you place your attention? So if I'm working at the level of, I want to resonate at a higher level of being, which means that I need to embody, to enhance, I need to become that quality fully expressed. If I want to experience peace in the world, I need to learn to be at peace. If I want to be loving in the world, I need to learn to love. Right? The work, and I haven't found a shortcut on this. Trust me, if I do, I'm going to sell that. I'm not just going to give that away for free. That'd be silly. But if I do find a shortcut, I'll make it available for, a big price. Right? That it always does come back to us to do our work. Now, that does not mean we shouldn't work to change the world in which we live in. But I find the difference of living in a place of love, living in a state of compassion, living in a state of fullness, then guides my activity. I still may want to work to make a difference in the world. I still want to work for a more just world, a better world. I want to make it a better place for our children. I want to do the things I can do to make this a better place. That's why I choose to do ministry. But I'm not doing it thinking that if I change everything around me, everything will be okay inside of me. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you ever do that? I'm not looking at you specifically, but you just all purple there, so, right? Do you ever do that? Where you think if you can just change what's around you, you can change what's within you? I love what John Stringer said in part of his workshop. He just said, if the new car, you go out, you get your Maserati or you get whatever, and you sit in it. It's got that new car smell, and it's what you've always envisioned and dreamed about, and there you are. And you feel good. He said, if it's the car that gave you the feeling that 15 years later, when it's not so loving and the new car is long gone and the feeling's not there. If it were the car that gave you the feeling would still be there 15 years later. Yeah. But it's our own perception of that. Right? So, the point of all of this is not understanding the laws of mind. Do not change it for you. Doesn't make the law go away. You see, denial, I'm not talking denial and affirmation, I'm talking denial that says it isn't so, doesn't make it not so. Right? So it's acknowledging the facts. It's acknowledging the emotions. It's acknowledging the feelings. It's acknowledging what's happening and then making the new choice for who will I be. Will I be more loving? Will I be more gracious? Will I be more calm? Will I be more centered? Will I be more graceful? Right? It always comes back to who do I choose to be today? Who do I choose to be in this moment? Who do I choose to be? And then by its very nature, we can let go of controlling, because by just the nature of how the universe works, it does its thing. If we resonate at this level, chaos and discord, we get chaos and discord in our lives. Don't take it personal. That's what I learned. Don't take it personal. But personally, I get to change it. If I can vibrate at a higher level, then I attract a higher level of being. It's all good. And it takes practice and intention and some discipline and some ongoingness. No big deal. So no matter what our emotional storm, whatever our objective situation may be, there is always something hidden in our inner being that has never been violated. We may stumble, but there is always that eternal voice. There is always that divine intelligence. There is always that infinite wisdom causing us on that eternal quest that forever sings to us, that ever calls us unto itself. Our spiritual work is to keep returning to Source, to keep returning to who we are, to be not dismayed by the conditions of the world, but to know what is so. Jesus said that we find this kingdom, this spiritual dimension within ourselves. Isn't that wonderful? You say, well, not me. Well, yeah, you, even you, right? And the more we return to it, the easier it becomes. The more natural it becomes until it becomes our habitual way of being. And until it becomes just like putting on your shoe, whether you're lefty or righty. Right? It becomes our natural way of being in the world once it has become our habitual way of being in the world. So the journey is good. I would say unto you that ignorance of the law is no excuse. It will change nothing. So why not embrace the law and work with it? Why not embrace that there are spiritual principles and realize, what do I need to do to be different and to have a different experience? What level of being do I need? In closing, I bring the words forward from Romans 12 where it is written, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of the divine, what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. There is a divine self calling unto itself through us. We can be renewed, we can be transformed through the renewal of the mind, which is to say our heart, our mind, our soul. Let us pray. As we move into that awareness of the one life ever present, always available, this divine intelligence, whatever we call it, that is forever and ever letting itself be in the world, that is creation itself. And we know that creation creates through that which it has created. So we are reminded that closer than hands and feet, nearer than our breath, we exist in the one. There's a divine intelligence that beats itself through our heart, that breathes itself through our lungs, that expresses through every cell and every system of our being. And as we remember this truth, it becomes very easy to speak this word, for we are knowing and calling forth wholeness. Wholeness expressing itself as love, as health, as well-being. We're speaking the word of truth as we recognize this divine love is everywhere present, always available. It calms us. It allows us to see with eyes that can see and hear with ears that can hear, to move beyond the appearance of things, to see the essence, to create loving, nurturing, supportive relationships. We are reminded that we are abundant beings right here, right now. That we joyously give and joyously receive of the divine bounty. That life is good and all is well. So we set a new intention for ourselves this day. that we might be more expansive in our thinking and in our loving. We extend ourselves to be a blessing. We bless the spiritual community, this divine idea. We extend our blessing to our brothers and sisters around the planet. We hold a high vision for a planet at peace, for a world that works for all. We extend a blessing. We bless all priests, all rabbis, all ministers, all teachers of all faiths. For we recognize there are many pathways to the divine. And so in joy and gratitude, then, I simply let it be so. Knowing that the law of mind operates upon the consciousness that we have established, the word spoken here, to bring forth the highest good for all concerned. In joy and gratitude, then, I simply say, and so it is. Amen.